This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio. This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's November 1st, 2024. On this day, back in 1881, the first electric company was founded in the city of Nashville. The service provided was nothing like what we've got out there today, even before Nashville started overhauling all of its streetlights recently. But there are still ways to have little run-ins with the early history of electrification in Nashville. I'm Tony Gonzalez, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with a bit of history and context from WPLN News. A few years back, I got to have a memorable brush with early Nashville infrastructure. It was when you, our listeners, asked Curious Nashville to examine some rumors about tunnels beneath various downtown Nashville sites. For one of those explorations, I ended up going with a friend to look beneath a Cumberland riverfront brick building that dates back to around 1901.
Looks like the tunnel's just above 6 feet at the entrance because I can stand pretty comfortably here. I see a big hole in the ground.
We get inside and we regroup, grab our flashlights, we shine them on the walls, and I'm really looking for any kind of evidence or clues. But there's nothing. I mean, there's a little bit of garbage, not even as much as I expected. This tunnel is pretty pristine. We're able to walk through it about 50 feet. But then the tunnel comes to a massive, intimidating halt. There is a gigantic collapse in front of us.
Looks like some kind of concrete that's fallen down right in front of us. And there's lots of rusty metal pipes going every which way. And there's a little tiny crawl space. Probably just enough room for one of us to crawl through if we were really brave. I'm not sure that I want to get underneath that boulder, though.
Mysterious, right? You can get that full story by looking up our tunnels reporting for Curious Nashville. But here's the part that connects to today's date in history. That structure, which still stands, was among the earliest pieces of electricity. But here's the part that connects to today's date in history. That structure, which still stands, was among the earliest pieces of electricity infrastructure in the city. The tunnel, as best as we could glean from archival records, was part of a gigantic powerhouse that sat at the edge of the river, burning through 200 tons of coal per day to generate power. And the decrepit building, falling apart and overgrown with vines, still stands there. It's just off Gay Street on the river's edge. It's about an arm's length away from one bend in the Greenway. You could go rub elbows with it if you so chose. The first power provider was called Brush and Electric Light and Power Company. Later, Nashville Lighting and Power Company. By the end of 1882, they had 108 arc lights around the city. And 5 years later, increasing demand prompted work on an additional power plant. The next milestone, which made it more akin to today's Nashville electric service, came in 1889. That's when the city of Nashville first began contracting with the company to replace what had been gas street lamps with those powered by electricity. In just a few minutes, we'll hear from a disenfranchised voter who's working to make her voice heard. That's coming up after the newscast.
We know that local government isn't the only part of your life.
Like the mayor, I know that city government isn't the only thing you're concerned with.
We are still struggling to find affordable housing.
They're taking over this bus stop.
That's one of the unique challenges with my business.
I'm WPLN's Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams. I'm working to break down topics like transit, housing, and local government to make sure that when you are thinking about Metro, you're getting the full story. Follow my latest stories at WPLN.org.
For WPLN News in Nashville, I'm Tony Gonzalez. Tennessee's high school graduation rate rose last year to a new high. The latest state figures put the rate at 92.1%. Across the state, 78 districts improved and 7 saw improvements of at least 5 percentage points. English language learners saw a large jump, up 12 percentage points. Metro saw one of the highest graduation rates in its recorded history. The district says the growth brings the graduation rate in the city to more than 85%. Early voting turnout in Davidson County ended up lower than in the 2020 contest. Nearly 210,000 voters cast ballots across the county. That's 5% behind the 2020 pace. Still, voters like kindergarten teacher Deidre Cox were motivated. She voted at the Bordeaux Library.
I just had to make sure I vote today because the stakes are high, and we've never had an election like this. It seems different. I guess because Joe Biden, got out the race at the last minute, and then we got a new person. That's something that's rare that I never heard of.
In recent elections, about half of voters have been choosing to wait until Election Day to go to the polls. The election is obviously on the mind of many voters, as evident on the latest episode of our daily show, This is Nashville. As Nashvillians called in to pose questions to Mayor Freddie O'Connell, the transit referendum dominated the conversation. Callers asked about the referendum, what it involves, and what's in store for Nashville's transit if the measure doesn't pass.
Exactly the same that we've been doing for the past 25 years. So limited incrementalism is what would be it would remain the order of the day.
The referendum, which is the last item on the ballot for voters in Davidson County, proposes a half-cent sales tax increase to fund $3 billion worth of transportation upgrades. These include things like miles of new sidewalks, better traffic signals, and improved bus service. The leading campaigns pushing both for and against that referendum have filed their latest finance reports, revealing an ever-growing gap in funding. The Green Lights for Nashville PAC, a pro-transit campaign, reported spending upward of $1.3 million in October. In contrast, the anti-referendum Committee to Stop an Unfair Tax spent just under $40,000 for the same time period. There are still some unknowns surrounding the Green Lights funding source. Sources of their contributions are funneled through the Nashville Moves Action Fund, a different group that is not registered as a referendum committee. This has obscured who the individual donors are because they are not listed on the report. The Tennessee Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance has requested that the Nashville Moves Action Fund register as an official committee by November 5th. The National Weather Service is changing how it's issuing frost advisories and freeze warnings in Tennessee. The state's offices implemented a standardization for warnings in every county. WPLN's Caroline Eggers breaks it down.
Now, the Weather Service will only issue frost advisories or freeze warnings to highlight extreme events outside of climatological normals, meaning what is considered probable for a given date based on climate records. And what that means for people is that the Weather Service will no longer issue any frost or freeze warning between October and April. The new system will only highlight unusual events, like a late freeze in May.
The Weather Service will still share information about potential impacts from icy weather in its 7-day forecast, hazardous weather outlooks, and in forecast discussions. And while we're barely past Halloween, Metro Parks is already asking Nashvillians to start thinking about Christmas. That's because the Parks Department is looking for the perfect tree for its December 6th tree lighting ceremony in Public Square Park. Ideally, it will also be a tree that needs to be cut down anyway, because it's grown too big or gotten too close to someone's house. If you think you have a tree in your yard that's ready for its close-up, let Metro Parks know soon. The department will cut down the winning tree, grind the stump, and plant a new one in its place. You'll find more news at WPLN.org. With just a few days to go until Election Day, most Tennesseans know where their polling place is and when they'll vote, if they haven't already. But some voters are still waiting on the green light to cast their ballot. That's because the state is asking a Nashville judge to reconsider granting them their voting rights. WPLN's Mariana Bacallao reports these voters are in limbo because of a relatively new state rule that makes it harder for formerly incarcerated Tennesseans to restore their voting rights.
When Amanda Hopkins first began the process to regain her right to vote, she thought it would be as simple as turning in a form and getting a court sign-off.
That was definitely not what it turned out to be. So it's been numerous court dates, numerous appeals, just seeming like designed for failure, almost like.
Hopkins is one of nearly 400,000 Tennesseans who can't vote because of a felony conviction. The state has the highest percentage of disenfranchised voters in the country, with nearly 8% of the eligible voting population unable to cast a ballot, according to the Sentencing Project. A relatively new rule requires people to restore their right to own a gun in order to restore their right to vote. Since most felonies come with a lifelong ban on owning a gun, the rule keeps people from voting who otherwise would have been able to restore their rights, like Hopkins.
Why fight so hard against someone who is trying to do the next right thing? Why fight so hard to keep me out of a voting poll?
Hopkins had fulfilled all the requirements, and a Nashville judge restored her voting rights. But right before the voter registration deadline, Tennessee's Attorney General's office appealed the order, citing the gun ownership rule.
Even though I've had numerous certificates, paperwork showing every accomplishment that I've made, showing that I'm a productive citizen, showing all the outreach stuff that I do, and I still got an appeal. So sometimes you just feel like no matter how much you do, how much you change, it's always going to be about what you did before.
The state urged the judge to reconsider her ruling at a Friday hearing. State Attorney Zachary Barker cited a state Supreme Court case which had found that a person who regains their full citizenship rights doesn't necessarily regain the right to own a firearm.
The restoration order does not restore petitioners' firearms rights. Thus, it does not restore firearms the full rights of citizenship. And we know that because the right to possess a firearm is a right of citizenship.
Judge Angelita Dalton cited the same case in her original order granting Hopkins her full citizenship rights, but not her gun ownership rights. In response to the state's appeal, Judge Dalton will release another order to determine if Hopkins and 3 other disenfranchised voters can cast a ballot this election. Attorney Keita Haynes, who represents Hopkins and the other petitioners, says that if the judge's final order does not come soon, the Election Commission has approved using provisional ballots. But that's not an ideal situation for her clients, Haynes says.
Like, they do a provisional ballot and then they can come back and they can deny their restoration, and there's a possibility that they can be charged.
Haynes pointed to a case in Texas in which a woman didn't know she wasn't eligible to vote and was criminally charged for casting a ballot.
Who wants to take that chance of possibly, being prosecuted for voting?
Hopkins says that regardless of the final ruling, to her, the judge has already recognized all the work she's done for her community.
I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to be mad. What that's going to do is give me the courage to keep pushing and try to continue to fight for my restoration rights.
At 45 years old, Hopkins has never voted. She said that she wasn't civically engaged when she had the right to vote. Since completing her sentence and overcoming addiction, she's become more involved in her community.
It would mean a lot to me personally because I am very community oriented. I love to be a part of something. And I've been encouraging my daughter to get out and vote. Even though I'm not able to vote, I'm still encouraging folks, get out and vote.
With Election Day right around the corner, Hopkins is still waiting on a final decision. If the final order is in her favor, it could pave the way for more people to restore their voting rights, even if they can no longer own a gun. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe in your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your social media. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. Thanks for listening.